Hello, do you know why the flag of Corsica is a skull on a white background, death, which is of course spelled M-A-U-R-E? So it refers to the old term, designating the populations of North Africa, and not to deceased people. And what does the bandana on the forehead represent in Mediterranean culture? You don't know? Well, we're going to see all of this together. The origin of the symbol remains debated among historians. There are two main theories about the flag's origin. The first, which is supported by all the perspectives of historians consulted with one exception, is as follows. This emblem of the skull, which is the oldest emblem of Corsica, is directly linked to the attribution of Corsica to the King of Aragon, which was a Spanish kingdom of the Middle Ages. At the very end of the 13th century, the kings of Aragon had for a certain time integrated 4 Saracen heads surrounding a cross on their coat of arms. This representation was notably attested on the Aragonese king's seal when Aragon received Corsica and Sardinia. The Pope granted it as part of a political deal between several powerful medieval lords of that era. This Saracen head, which over time became a skull, I will revisit the distinction between these terms later, would have explicitly symbolized the defeated Muslims, in this case by the dynasty ruling over Aragon. During the Crusades and, of course, during the Reconquista, that is the progressive reconquest by Christians of the Iberian Peninsula occupied by Muslim powers. But what is the difference between the term death and Saracen? Well, the first specifically referred to populations originating from North Africa, while the term Saracen was less specific and referred to Muslim populations from the Mediterranean basin and the Middle East as a whole. So there is nothing shocking about the term death, as much as Saracen designating this standard when it appeared both terms being perfectly suited to the Aragonese context, and led to the creation of the emblem. Thus we find this symbol both as the standard of Sardinia. The flag is present from the Middle Ages in Cagliari's, the island's main city coat of arms, and also as the emblem of Corsica, at least from the end of the 14th century, if not rather when the skull appears on a yellow background as the emblem of Corsica. In a large collection of coats of arms of the time produced in the current Netherlands, this emblem also appears in other armories of Western Europe in the following years, notably in France. And what about the headband? Well, its history seems rather simple. This headband simply represents the so-called crowns of the defeated Saracen chiefs, these having been turbans, certainly of jewels, before being simplified in their representation, probably for practical reasons. But then, did the skull, however, serve as an emblem for the Corsicans or the local powers of the time? The most probable theory currently is that the skull, despite being attributed to Corsica by the Kingdom of Aragon, which never actually controlled the island, was not used there. This hypothesis, however, faces a doubt concerning certain pro-Aragonese Corsican feudatories who seem to have used an Aragonese emblem, without specifying what this emblem is, which could very well have been the colors of Aragon that you see on the screen rather than the testamora. As a result, throughout the medieval period and until at least the 16th century, so it is mainly an emblem attributed to Corsica by a foreign power, although it may have been used by some pro-Aragonese Corsican feudal lords. Alternatively, historian Michel Verger-Franceschi proposes a second hypothesis or perspective. This hypothesis, sometimes somewhat convoluted, essentially expresses the idea that the skull on the Corsican flag does not represent a Saracen, but a Christian saint. The Christian saint mentioned is Saint Maurice, or Maurice of Aragon, who was a soldier in the Roman army of the 4th century, originally from Thebes in Egypt. Without going into details, the latter, after refusing to follow an order contrary to what his Christian faith dictated, was martyred with his companions in Valais in present-day Switzerland. Consequently, depictions of Saint Maurice appear in numerous Alpine and Germanic heraldries. Saint Maurice became a patron saint of the Holy Roman Empire, a powerful medieval empire that encompassed much of Central Europe, especially the Germanic territories. From an aesthetic standpoint, the medieval representation of Saint Maurice bears a striking resemblance to the Corsican death's head. Among other hypotheses, he considers that the skull on Corsican heraldry from the 14th century is perhaps justified more by a potentially erroneous transcription and potentially influenced by the context and trends of the time within the Germanic world, from which came the author of the collection of coats of arms that I mentioned a little earlier. Although this point is debatable, since we find this same emblem in French armorials dating to roughly the same period. Whatever the origin of the Corsican skull, which can probably, in both hypotheses, prove to be true. The emblem reappears in the 16th century, clearly associated with Corsica, by Italian geographer Minoldi Gallerati. This skull in Corsica and its African attributes will take on a much more European profile. There is also little doubt that this symbol was indeed used to identify the Aragonese possessions, which in the meantime had become Spanish, explaining why the Italian author reuses this symbol instead of inventing it. This representation will serve as a reference for many geographical maps of the area. While the island is in fact governed not by a state but by a Genoese bank, which will end up attaching the island to the Republic of Genoa, a topic for another video. However, the skull and crossbones only became the rallying symbol for the Corsican people in the 18th century. And this for the first time during the ephemeral kingdom of Corsica, from the German nobleman Theodor de Neuhoff, who landed on the island with this standard, where the skull appears, this time on a white background and the bandana over the eyes. However, Neuhoff's reign will only last 6 months in total. I know that I probably piqued your curiosity, but don't worry, that too I will tell you when we approach the history of Corsica. However, Pasquale Paoli was a major figure in Corsica's revolution against Genoa and the battle for its independence at Lille. This standard became the lasting emblem of the Corsican people. At that moment, the headband was again raised on the forehead. When Paoli's forces are hard-pressed by a powerful troop sent by the Kingdom of France. In 1769, Corsica becomes a French island, but the Testa-Moor remains, although accompanied by fleur-de-lis, the emblem of the French monarchy. This symbol is maintained during the Revolution to represent the Department of Corsica. Then it peacefully made its way to our present day. The French king's fleur-de-lis have been removed. This emblem, now a flag and standard, the Bandera Testa-Moor, represents both the community of Corsica and the people of this Mediterranean island, to the point where we find the Testa-Moor on many coats of arms, brands, and illustrations, instantly evoking this Mediterranean island, whose history is fascinating, with sublime landscapes and a culture that intrigues as much as it fascinates. A very big thank you for watching this video. I also thank all my kind proofreaders from the Herodotus label, whose names you will find in the description. For more videos of this type, subscribe by pressing the bell. It's important because without it, unfortunately, you have a high chance of not seeing the next videos. With that, I'll see you right away for more stories.